You're listening to Passing Time, a Detroit Lions podcast. We're one pride and all grit, with a passion for Detroit Lions football. Whether you're between meetings, between classes, sitting in traffic, or just relaxing at home, if you have time to pass, pass it with Passing Time. Detroit Lions Talk.
All right, we're on the clock now, and you're passing time with us. I'm Rob.
I'm Brian.
And this is episode 8. This is our first emergency podcast. We're going to call this pod our 2-minute offense. It's a quick, decisive, straight down the field.
So what do we got to talk about? What's the emergency that we want to bring to the listeners here?
We're going to still feature our normal pod later this week, but today we're just talking about one thing. What are we talking about today, Brian?
Oh, man, Frank. So Frank Ragnow today announced on Instagram that he is retiring. So
you know this already. You guys already know this, but we are going to dive a little bit deeper into it. It's tough news as Lions fans.
And the questions are like, was it a surprise? Was it not a surprise? And how do we feel? Right? What's the reaction after we hear Frank is retiring, and who's going to fill in to replace him?
What are the Lions losing? Who could we be mad at? What are we losing? Who are we going to turn to? And what's Bill think? Right? That's kind of what we're gonna.
Right.
That's what we're gonna get done on this podcast today. So, first off, today we're going to talk about just the man, Frank Ragnow. He's retiring. Why is he retiring? What are the Lions losing? What's the contract situation looking like? There's a lot of things going on here. Ryan, can you lead us off a little bit with this?
So the speculation earlier last week when we got into OTAs was Frank Ragnow wasn't reporting to OTAs, and the big speculation was contract. Did he want more money? Is he unhappy? He didn't have any guaranteed money in the 2 years that he left on his contract. He was supposed to make $9.15 million going into 2025, and then another $11.5 million going into 2026. And so the speculation was he was unhappy because none of that money was guaranteed. So was he holding out? Was he not reporting to OTAs because of money? And little do we know, going into this, is that it wasn't about money at all. It was about health. It was about his physical, well-being, going into his future of his life. So
29 years old, 7 years in the NFL, former first-round pick. Talk a little bit about the injury history this guy's had, because I think it's important to mention. He has been through the ringer. So
He is a warrior. He was a guy that would play through every single injury that you can think of. You and I would probably be upset about a hangnail, and this guy is playing through a inoperable toe injury, a torn pectoral muscle, a groin injury, a fractured throat.
These are all injuries this is what it sounds like if you were to get into a fight with Dan Campbell. These are the injuries that you're going to end up with.
Right?
An inoperable toe injury, a fractured throat. Unbelievable.
This guy played through it all, and he was a man of his word. He wanted to be able to play for the Lions and give his all to the Lions. He hated missing games. He wanted to be there for his teammates, and he just found it like he was at the end of his rope. He was at the end of the ability to give his all for this team. And, we can't really, we can't feel bad or I guess we can't feel bad for the Lions. We can't say that he was wrong for doing that.
No, the cool thing about Dan Campbell is he's a guy, he's always taking care of the vets, right? He protected this story. Dan Campbell protected this story. Alex Anzalone, are we even 100% sure there's a contract dispute? Because that's what was the rumor with Frank, right? But what does the Lions, brass do? They go up to the microphone and they don't air dirty laundry.
And you heard Dan say, there's two guys that are not here, and I know who they are, and I've been in contact with them, and I'm not going to share that with you guys.
Yeah.
I'm keeping that, whatever I have to share with Frank, whatever I'm sharing with Alex, those are between us, and we're going to figure this out. We're not going to air their dirty laundry. We're going to take care of it internally. We're going to respect their wishes, and we're going to do it with class.
It's part of the reason that Detroit is going to attract veteran players in the future. They have attracted them in the past, and they are going to attract them in the future because it's the culture.
And you look what Frank posted on Instagram. He respected the Lions. He said, you know what? I wanted to give more. like I thought I had the ability to give more. I just don't have it in me.
Yeah.
And the Lions respected that. They looked at Franklin and said, "Hey, take your time, make your decision, figure out if you can. We'd love to have you back. We'd love to have you back. I mean, he's in second team All Pro in 2024. Could have been more. I mean, he's a perennial, Pro Bowl player, and he's one of the best.
Yeah, I mean, is this time to panic? I don't think it's time to panic, Lions fans. I think that this is not ideal. It's not what we.
I would say not ideal would probably be putting it lightly.
Yes, probably
when you look at a guy that's is one of the best in his positions, who is the center of your offense. We'll talk about this with Bill when we bring up his bullet points. Like he might be one of the best players on the Lions roster.
He might be one of the best players. He's aging. He's had some injury history. Like, who knows what he is this year if the guy can't go at it. So, like, were we already losing part of the guy that we have thought of in the past?
That's the question mark, right? He obviously didn't have the ability to give it all at this point in his career, and the injuries were starting to catch up to him. He had the healthiest season he's had in a long time in 2024, and you wonder if that just caught up to him. I mean, he was playing through all of these things that we talked about: partially torn pectorals, calf injuries, groin injuries, and the list goes on and on.
Yeah, pretty unbelievable. So the one thing, if we go back and just think about like going into this draft, one thing that's now obvious, and even going back into our earlier podcast where we talk about kind of an embarrassment of the riches in the trenches for the Lions. Like, we're just kind of scratching our heads. Like, we've never had this before. I think we use rich man problems. Well, really, they were maybe some ghost man problems, right? Because we don't have it like we think we have it. But it's obvious that Brad Holmes and the Detroit Lions were relatively prepared for this to happen this year.
So that was my first thought. Like, did the Lions know? And obviously now looking back at all of the things that we kind of talked about earlier, they knew. They knew that this was a very definite possibility. They wanted to give Ragnow, the ability to make the decision on his own. I'd say they wanted him back. I mean, let's be honest. You want an all-pro center, the center of your offensive line back, but they didn't want to rush him. They didn't want to pressure him. They did it with class. And so we talk about some of the past retirements before their prime, and we can go back to the Barrys and the Kelvins and the possible Gronks, if you want to even consider that as a possibility.
This one's not on the Lions.
This is not on the Lions. This is not their fault. Yeah. They did it correctly.
Yeah. It's a bummer. It's the timing of this feels like it's catching us fans off guard, right?
So that's the worry, right? You see now on social media, like, oh, the window's closing. The window's closed. Without Frank, the window's not there. And I guess we can't, like you talked about this before, we can't panic. The Lions knew they drafted Tate Ratledge, they drafted Miles Frazier, they have Graham Glasgow, they have Christian Mahogany, they have these guys in order to fill the spots. Now it's going to be getting them up to speed. It's finding what the best fit is, and there's going to be some competitions there. We have already talked about what's our best fit at that center position now, knowing that Frank is not going to be here.
Yeah, well, let's get into that, but let's just talk about the window, right? But one thing that just strikes me is the window's closing. It's not this stagnant window that either is opening or it's closing. This window is dynamic. This window is it's closing. It was wide open because of all the depth that we have in the interior line and the great drafts we've had.
Yeah,
we talked about like, man, this window looks really, really open, and all of a sudden this happens. It's closed. If JMO breaks out, is the window still closed? There's a lot of things that are going to happen that the windows are perpetually. The Lions stay relatively healthy this year. That keeps the window a little bit more open, right? What happens with other teams? There's a lot going on that we can't just pigeonhole this window down to one guy or one scenario.
Absolutely. And you consider, like, last year the Lions had to I'm sorry, the offense had to take on like the weight of the Lions' success. And does that shift maybe a little bit in the 2025? Does that go to the defense, and do they have to take on the weight of this while we figure out some of the center positions, the guard positions, and do we allow JMO to break out? And the crazy thing is we still have a lot of riches while trying to figure this out.
Yeah, we got Dan Campbell. He's a guy that he'd be outnumbered 10-1. He's going to take his guys down the battlefield right into war. And I'll tell you what, Frank Ragnow, I don't want to downplay it. You can listen to 20 other podcasts that are they're just going crazy about this. But what I do want to say is we're talking about a guy that basically has been held together by duct tape and chewing gum over the last couple of years, getting towards the end of his career.
Yeah.
And we have some young and up-and-coming guys that potentially could surprise in the upside here.
And let's be honest, Brad Holmes did this with intention. He knew what he was doing. He drafted two guys with really good draft picks, our second round and our fifth round, which were great spots at those positions in order to fill the gap that he knew was a potential gap. Right. And that's, no doubt, yeah. and that's it's great is looking back now and saying, okay, he did this with intention. He did this with a purpose.
Yeah. We got a great GM. We got a great coach. There's a lot of good things here. This is a very sour note. I don't want to downplay that. Neither does Brian.
No.
But we can move. We can move on from here. So let's talk a little bit about where do we move. And this episode, we're going to spend more time in-house. Later this week, we're going to dive into a little bit more. What are some potential options outside the house?
Sure.
But, to me, and to you, probably the number one first-year option here is Glasgow.
And Glasgow's played that position. I mean, when Frank was a rookie, Frank played guard. Yes. And who played center at that time?
That was Graham Glasgow.
It was Graham Glasgow.
2018, Graham Glasgow started every game at center for your Detroit Lions. Matter of fact, he played every one but one snap all year. And I'll keep that same number one finger up because that's how many sacks he gave up all year from the center position.
And now that was 2018. It was a bit ago, right? And he's obviously aged since then.
But not you, Brian.
Yeah. Okay. But Graham, is that veteran center who has a relationship with Jared Goff, who's played the position, as time went on when Frank has been dinged up. We talked about his injury history, and he's missed some games. Yeah. So Graham has been the guy to fill in those spots. And you would think that he would be the natural guy to help bridge the gap.
Absolutely. He played a little bit of center in Denver too, just spot plays there. But also, let's talk about another option here that happened in the draft.
So Tate Ratledge was drafted, and you initially thought right guard, that's his natural position. That's where he's going to fit in perfectly for the Detroit Lions. But if you look at rookie minicamp, if you look at the first week of OTAs, where's Tate Ratledge getting primarily his reps? It's center.
You remember the term getting Wally pipped? Wally Pipp, came in and he was the starting. I don't even know this. I'm bringing this up, but he was the starting center fielder. I think when Hank Aaron came in or he got hurt. We could have the whole new thing. You can get Graham Glasgow, and this might happen twice, right? Graham Glasgow starting center in 2018. Upstart rookie comes in, starts at guard next to him. Next year, Frank Ragnow, that upstart rookie, takes over at center. This year, fast forward 8 years later, Graham Glasgow's playing center. Rookie comes in, plays guard next to him, learns a little bit. Very next year, you have a guy that's your new starting center of the future.
And that's what Hank Fraley was talking about in his presser last week. He talked about how Tate Ratledge looks like he could be a very solid center in the future. And whether that means that future is sooner than we anticipate or if it's next year, that's to be determined right now. And we're going to have to see some OTAs, and we're going to have to see some training camp, and we're going to have to see some preseason games in order to determine where those guys really fit in.
Yeah, also worth mentioning that Graham Glasgow made 22 starts at center in college, 15 at guard. So, this is a guy that's got, he's got a handful of seasons under center.
And he's the veteran presence, right? You want your center to be a guy that's going to be able to make the calls, that can pick up blitzes, that's going to be able to really be the quarterback of your offensive line. Yeah. And Graham has experience in doing that. He is no Frank Ragnow, but he is definitely the next guy that I would say on the current Detroit roster that would fill that spot. So,
and we're lucky to have that situation. Miles Frazier, another guy. So he steps into the young version of what Graham Glasgow is, where they're going to cross-train this guy, and he's got to be potentially Ratledge's guy back up next year at the very least, right? Or a guy that can plug into the other interior positions.
And we're gonna have to figure this out, right? He is one of those guys that we're excited about. We want to see what he's capable of. He is going to be able to play tackle or guard and possibly even center. And he's already talked about, like, he's going to train at each of these positions in order to be the best option, come a need. So he wants to be on the field. Let's be honest.
Yeah, and another guy, Manu now has to be. He changes from it's great if he can guy to oh shit if he can't, right?
Right. Like, we're gonna need Manu. Dan Skipper is gonna be one of those guys that has to be able to be that sixth offensive lineman. In those big sets, he's gonna be the next tackle in. But Manu might be the future Taylor Decker. He might be the next Dan Skipper. Yeah. He might overtake him this year. That's the hope. The hope is that these plans that our genius GM has put into place is going to come to fruition, right? So, Brad Holmes, we're trusting you right now, but the reality is Manu better pay off, and Mahogany better pay off, and Frazier better pay off, and Ratledge better pay off, and Graham better play better. So.
Yeah, it sounds like what my wife says when I go to the bar. I'm trusting you right now, but you better be home at 10 o'clock, and you're waking up at 6 a.m. with the kids, and you're feeding me breakfast, and we got to go to my parents' house at lunch. There's a lot of expectations on there.
So that's true. And with what we have going on, with a Super Bowl aspiration type team, mm-hmm. There's high aspirations. There's high expectations. There's GMs that need to produce, and Brad Holmes has proven it, right? He has proven the fact that he can draft well. He is thoughtful in the future. He's not just drafting for 2025. He's working towards the future, and he knows what we need. I'm just hoping that he has those ability to fill the holes that we have now.
Yeah, and there's more of that chatter here later this week, where we're going to dive a little bit deeper into free agent possibilities. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about, obviously there's some freeing up the cap this year. There's some freeing up the cap next year. There was already some cap issues, so it's not like total additions here.
Sure.
There's some things going on there. MCDC got in front of the microphone. He's always got good sound bites. J-Mo, when he talks, you listen.
I love it.
Jack Campbell, Jared Goff, DJ Reed. There's some to digest there. And we have some good instant reactions there that we want to talk about with you.
And we will in the next little bit, next pod. So stay tuned. Follow us on Instagram. Not Instagram. Sorry. We can produce that. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Blue Sky. We're on YouTube. You know that right now. We're on anywhere you can find your podcasts. So
except Instagram, apparently.
Sorry about that. We might be able to get that going.
And maybe a quick little shout out to a couple more prominent podcasts that have shown us a little bit of love over the last week.
Yeah. Jason and Jacob on Talking Grid, thank you so much. We reached out to you guys to say, hey, give us some feedback. What do we need to do? What are we doing wrong? What are we doing right? And you took the time, and we actually really appreciate that. So thank you so much for that.
And one more shout out for a pod. If you are bored, go follow the Grizzly Man pod. It's on YouTube. It's Frank Ragnow. He's going to have a lot more time, a lot more content to put out, but it's some pretty interesting stuff. Tackling, 40-pound grouper out in the Atlantic Ocean and ice fishing and doing all the things.
Huge walleye and salmon and all those types of things. My son's 13 right now. He is a football player, but he's he's also an outdoorsman, and he is going to love a Frank Ragnow Grizzly Man pod.
No doubt. And don't blame the guy for wanting to have his family, have him be around and do some of these things. So congrats, Frank, man. Like, enjoy retirement. Man, thanks for the great years you gave the Detroit Lions.
Yeah. Hey, we're not mad at you. We're sad that you're gone. Like we would be with any great player, right? You know, it's tough to lose. As a great franchise now, a program that we've talked about before, you know, we're going to lose some of these players, and some of these players are going to have to move on, and we're going to have to figure some of those things out along the way. And this just seems to be the first. So,
hey, it's the next man up mentality. And for you, it's the next pod up mentality. So check us out later this week. We thank you for joining us. This is our first emergency pod, unscripted, filmed after the 10 o'clock hour. Kids are in bed, and Ryan and I are enjoying it. So we love you. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for passing time.